today we are going to be talking about apostrophes and specifically how we use apostrophes to show possession. So with this, we'll always need to be using a noun. Remember, a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. And this is just important to remember because a lot of times we think about possession with people, but it can also be with inanimate objects or abstract ideas. You could say Sarah's, and I would be a noun because my name is Sara. Sarah's dog. You could also say the chair's fabric. And so just keeping in mind that a lot of things can show possession. It just has to be a noun. So when you're tested on apostrophes and showing possession, it's important to make sure that it should be possessive. And we're going to ask ourselves these questions when we see apostrophes and possession in the same question. Should it be possessive? And if so, how do I make a noun possessive and make sure that that is grammatically correct? So let's ask ourselves these questions with the following sentences. Everything can be done in a day's work. So first, is this showing possession? What owns what here? Or what technically has what? So a good test that we can do here is everything can be done in a day's work. Just switch that around and say everything can be done in the work of a day. The work of a day. That still makes sense. So making sure that you're able to switch that around and it still makes sense in the sentence. You could say the child's backpack, the backpack of a child. Making sure that it still makes sense. Yes, it should show possession. Then we want to make sure that it's right. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So let's look at this one. Families of Fulbright scholars often share one thing in common. Here, this actually should not be possessive. We would just get rid of that apostrophe right there because we already have the of, and it's showing that we're talking about the families of Fulbright scholars. So making sure that not only are we checking that the apostrophe is accurately placed, but that we need one at all is really important. So let's go ahead and look at our rules for possession. First, I want to say that these are very simple. We just have to stick to three main rules. If the noun is singular, add apostrophe S. We just did this a couple times up there. Remember, my name is Sara, so Sarah's dog. I am singular. We added apostrophe and an S. What if we were talking about someone whose name already ends in an S, like Miles? Let's say Miles had a cat. Well, Miles is singular, so we add apostrophe S. Miles is cat. Do not be scared of those two S's next to each other. This is grammatically correct. If the noun is singular, you're always okay to add apostrophe S. If the noun is plural and does not end in S, add apostrophe S. So a lot of times my students have come to sort of a block here because they're like, oh, Sara, well, you always use an S to show if something's plural, which is true most of the time, but not always because you can have one child. But if you had two, you would call them children. So this is plural, does not end in an S. We'd say apostrophe S. So, the children's store is just around the corner. Looks more like stove. Let's make sure that's an R. So keeping in mind, a lot of times you'll see animals, like you could say the deer, and mean plural deer. Context matters. Just make sure that you're looking in the sentence. The deer's food. If the noun is plural and ends in an S, just add an apostrophe. So let's say we were talking about multiple members of a jury. So there were 7 jurors with questions. So from this sentence up here, before, we know that there are going to be multiple, and so that's plural. So the jurors' questions consisted of, and we don't have to finish that sentence, just to know that when the noun is plural and ends in S, all we would do is put the apostrophe there. In the same way, if we were talking about a ton of soldiers in the paragraph, and then we said, well, all of the soldiers' boots, it's plural, it ends in S, so we just add an apostrophe right there. So pretty much the majority of the time, we're adding apostrophe S unless the noun is plural and ends in S. It doesn't matter if what they own is singular or plural. It doesn't matter if it's one question that they all had or multiple questions. It's just about whether or not the noun, the person, place, thing, idea owning it, is plural. Now, there's one more thing that we need to touch base on, and this is our special case of it's with an apostrophe and without an apostrophe. So to show possession with it's actually just its, no apostrophe. So that is possessive. So an example would be the plane lost its engine. No apostrophe here, that would be correct. It's with an apostrophe right there means it is. So that's actually the contraction. If you ever see its apostrophe, you know that is wrong. That's not even a word that exists. And one thing that might help you remember that is that it doesn't even follow our rule. Because remember, if it's singular, then there's no way it would just end in an apostrophe. And it is, in fact, singular. So if you ever see its apostrophe, know that that is absolutely not a word. And as long as you stick to, remember our special case, add an apostrophe S. In other cases, unless it's plural and ends in S.